Well, first of all, good morning. So first of all, this morning, I want to, for those of you who do not know, that the 17th Karmapa is ill and spending extra time in the United States to recover. So in these circumstances, then it's helpful for us to hold the wish and aspiration that he would recover quickly. And the best way we can express that wish is to engage in the practice of the Dharma itself. And so we are in an auspicious situation. Here we are, about to begin our sessions this morning and afternoon. So easy along the way to remind ourselves that the current representative of the entire Karmakaju lineage, and by extension a few others, are held by the 17th Karmapa. In our meditation today, we will have 3 sessions this morning. Leading up to a break at noon. Meanwhile, other sessions, other breaks for using the restroom, grabbing a drink of water or something. So our meditation this morning is I want to say primarily, and another part of me wants to say entirely, the practice of shamatha or calm abiding. Shamatha or calm abiding is of critical importance in our meditation practice, since the focus is developing the ability to rest naturally, free from discursive thinking, indeed free from our worldly concerns in general. In other words, it's a very difficult practice. Put all your troubles and pains, as well as your joys and everything else aside, to work with the mind itself is not a habit, particularly condoned by our culture. To sit and do nothing has all sorts of, it's described by all sorts of adjectives, none of which are particularly complimentary. So that's what's good about it. My intention this morning is to make the process of exploring primarily experientially, but you can't avoid the conceptual completely. To explore this practice of shamatha in a way that those who are adept at it already will find some new things in the practice. And those who are not adept at it or haven't even heard the name shamatha before, that you will also get something that you can take home with yourself. And that it will be a joy to practice, something to look forward to. Having said that, I have gathered a half a dozen aphorisms. You know what an aphorism is? It's a condensed statement, usually of just a few words, sometimes one or two, that tell you a lot about what the practice is about. So having said what we're going to do this morning, the first aphorism is, do not dwell on the future, which is beginning at this very moment. Do not anticipate the future. Nor the past. Since it has already passed and ceased, there's really nothing much there to think about. And I know we make things up. Space, in terms of the mind, spaciousness is anathema for us as hardcore doers. If there is some space, our habit is to fill it up with something, even if it's just angst about the fact that there's some space. Past is ceased, finished and gone. Nothing there to think about. But in the context of calm abiding, aside from the humor of some of the aphorisms, which are nonetheless profound, there are some things up front before we begin the practice which are critical. So if you have pen and pencil today, that's great. If you don't, it doesn't matter. All of this is recorded, for good or for bad. And one can sit down and tediously listen to it again and take notes. So either way, taking notes or not taking notes, your choice. First of all, we always begin every practice by turning our minds to refuge in the Buddha. So one of the things, as soon as we have turned our minds in that direction, one of the things we're going to do is look at the meaning of refuge. But first, we will together recite the refuge and bodhicitta prayer together 3 times.
Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. There is a reason why we go for refuge when we sit down together and when we sit down alone. Sometimes we can find the answer to that in our own mind stream at this very moment by virtue of seeing our pain or our suffering. We can sometimes also witness the causes of that suffering by virtue of recalling what are known as the 5 poisons, which unfortunately we have all imbibed too much of. At the top of the list is the emotion of anger, which we sometimes take to be a prize, a requirement in order to be a good person, or in order to be honest with oneself or others. But we count this, as we call it, klesha, conflicted emotion of anger, to be really an unfortunate and terrible cause of pain and suffering.
So we would like not only ourselves to be free of that, but we would like all beings to be free of it. The more we are free of it, the more we are a bringer of gifts to others who also would like to be free of it. In addition to anger, we also have jealousy. We can recognize all of these: anger, jealousy, pride, attachment and aversion, as causes at times of abject suffering. Of course, we would like to be free of it. We would like to not identify with it, as in, I am an angry person and proud of it. Not good. So when we go for refuge to the Buddha, we go for refuge to the Buddha as going to refuge with one who has utterly abandoned those 5 poisons. In one way, this is a spiritual quest, but in another way, isn't it just the case that if we want to learn something, we go to see someone who has already learned it? So those 5 poisons are critical. When we turn to go for refuge, they are one of the big reasons for going for refuge. And then we also have bodhicitta, which is the mind of awakening. So we call it the mind of awakening, but we need to also recognize that what that means is that we aspire to awaken from, for example, our commitment to the 5 poisons. You probably didn't notice you had a commitment to the 5 poisons. Stay tuned. Bodhicitta, the mind of awakening, is the heart of Mahayana Buddhism, the largest, whatever you want to call it, school, category, system. Bodhicitta is the heart. The aspiration to attain full awakening, not for ourselves individually, but for all sentient beings. So you might say, for ourselves collectively, that we might rise above all of the causes of unhappiness and confusion in order that all sentient beings might see that, might experience it, might be inspired to accomplish it. Of course. That aspiration is the core teaching for us in this room and in this tradition. This is the core teaching. The teachings, we could say the teachings, plural, on the issue of bodhicitta. We are not used to thinking about all sentient beings. It's very difficult to hold all sentient beings in our aspirations to benefit them. Our mind naturally says, what do you think you're doing? How could this has no benefit, this has no possibility of any kind. But each of us, if we look at our own past, we can see that the times when we have brought goodness in whatever form to another person is the times when we have witnessed ourselves as a cause of happiness for others more than any other thing. We are made happy by bringing happiness to others. So we could say, yeah, but what about shamatha? How does that benefit anyone? Or we might say, I'm practicing shamatha. How does that benefit anyone? These are things worthy of contemplation. If someone is suffering from disappointment, angst, loss, whatever the emotional state is, it's possible from time to time, we have probably all experienced it, moving into that kind of circle. And if our minds are still and calm and filled with loving kindness to others, that is transmitted to others. And they feel it, and they feel happy. Of course, then we have to deal with this thing of pride. But that's a small issue in comparison to the willingness, the ability, the aspiration to spend not just today, tomorrow, but our entire life to benefit others. It's good to benefit others, even though we probably feel like I'm doing it because it makes me feel good. So that just means we're on the first step. We have to go a little further. So when we begin the actual meditation called shamatha, we have these prerequisites in place. We have turned our minds to awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. We have reviewed in our own mind the presence and power of the 5 poisons: anger, jealousy, pride, ignorance, attachment, greed. They have slightly different names here and there, but they're all recognizable and simple to understand. So when we begin the practice, we go through that. If you're alone and engaging in the practice and you have, I notice that not everybody has one of these sheets. Maybe sometime in the break or after lunch we could give everyone one of those. That would be really nice, I think. It's too much to write down. So the practice of shamatha is fundamentally the practice or the development of the skill to relax the body by sitting still, whether you engage in formal postures, which can be very helpful, or you're sitting in a chair, which can also be very helpful. The most important single thing is that you sit where it's comfortable and where you can be still and not interrupted. And normally, when we practice shamatha, we place our awareness upon some object. Our awareness likes an object in order to be still and relaxed. Our mind likes it, our body likes it. An object is not required, we might say also, but it is usually helpful. So in this first session, let us start by adjusting whatever makes you comfortable, a way in which you can sit and relax. It's helpful to be vertical as opposed to horizontal, though there's absolutely nothing wrong with lying down and meditating. The issue, if there is an issue, is just that we tend to fall asleep. But if you can't sit up, which is a support for remaining awake, if you can't do it, then lie down. Here, at home, wherever it is. And we bring an object to mind. It could be like a cup of water. Really doesn't matter. It could be the image of your teacher, the image of your mother, a statue of the Buddha that you once saw, and now you're placing your awareness on your recollection of that statue. The point is to place your awareness on something with intention, not just accidentally. So, for example, I'll take this little leaf, which I think came from Bodh Gaya, probably. So it blew a long ways, thousands of miles. And if I use that as my object, I put my awareness on it, whatever you put your awareness upon, in the practice of shamatha, do not describe that object to yourself, nor anyone else. It is like the seat you're sitting on. It's just a place to rest the mind. Now, if I think of this leaf as a leaf that came from the Bodhi tree that the Buddha sat under and attained enlightenment, suddenly I have big charge on this leaf. It's better In the case of shamatha, just begin with something which is not charged. So have something. It could be you notice a pattern in the wood, in the floor. Or an image you recollect, and you place your mind there and hold it there. Now, hold it there is a little bit also anathema to the practice of shamatha. We want our mind to relax on that object without any effort whatsoever. It's not going to happen. And yet, engaging in training the object to do what it's supposed to do is also not the practice of shamatha. So with your mind on the object, you take a little energy to kind of focus on, to put your mind right there on the object. And you pretty much know it's not going to work because your mind is already trained to be distracted. So we're trying to train it to be less distracted and finally not distracted at all. So when the mind is distracted, of course, you notice that. When you notice that it's been distracted, you bring it back immediately to the object, whether it's the leaf from the Bodhi tree, or a little circle that you drew on a piece of paper in front of you. You bring it back, place your mind there again, and relax. When we say relax, we'd like to say both the mind and the body. But in this case, primarily, the body is the support for the mind relaxing. So I think we have it now. You have a place to place your mind, and you understand that when you recognize you've been distracted, you bring the mind back. No matter how many times you have to bring it back, that is not a measure of your success. The measure of your success is, as soon as you recognize that you've been distracted, you bring the mind back. If you're distracted 100 times and you bring it back every time, that is an A+. You will succeed. If your mind is distracted only once in 100 minutes, and you decide, I've been good, I don't need to bring it back this time, very bad. It's the wrong habit. Everything we do in our lives establishes habits. You don't have to be a drug addict. You get addicted anyway to whatever it is you're used to doing. So likewise, we want to use that propensity. When the mind is distracted, we are addicted to bringing it back. Don't even have to think. It's like it's attached to a rubber band. It just goes back on its own, even better. Okay, as best as you can. We'll take 10 or 15 minutes and do your best. while we engage in the practice, it's good periodically to take a short break right in the midst of the meditation making no effort to continue the meditation. Just relax and take care of your body a little bit. So you might need to stretch, stand up, bend, whatever works. Take a few minutes, whatever you need, and then on your own, when you feel ready, return to the meditation. Now, normally, when we begin another session here, if we're alone or not, we begin by concentrating, by bringing our awareness to the object of our meditation. In other words, we tighten our concentration because we have the idea that if the concentration is tightened, then our mind will rest more easily on the object of meditation. This is almost never the case. It almost always fails. The tighter the concentration, the more the mind rises up on its own to assert its own agenda, which is our agenda asserting itself. So one antidote to this is, instead of thinking, now I'll begin the meditation, and maybe in addition, in order that I might accomplish this or have this experience or that experience, we might start out by saying, I'm going to meditate, but only for the sake of the impetus, only in order to keep things moving. In other words, we're not establishing a particular goal of the meditation. And so that's one less thing that will interfere with our meditation. So as you finish your stretches and whatever you're doing there, you might start out by having a kind of simple approach to the meditation. At the end of a session, whatever that length is, it's important to always dedicate the value, the virtue, the merit, as we say, from this session. And our sense around that should not be that our gift of the meditation is less because we did not succeed. Just by virtue of being present and making the effort is success. Not just success kind of compromised, but on the way to something that's not compromised. We need to have a strong sense of the value of engaging in the meditation in this life and its probable, remarkably good consequences in the future. So with that in mind, we'll dedicate the merit now.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. So we will take a break now, and it's helpful during the break, which will be a minimum of 20 minutes, basically until everyone has finished using the 2 restrooms. and during that time, it's good to maintain silence and in your own mind carry a sense of stability, not allowing yourself to just wander quickly into anywhere where our busy minds want to go. So we'll ring the bell in 20 minutes or a little more and come back and continue